What if the person with deaf blindness always has something in their hands? So they always hold on to their favorite toy, right? Um, so I would probably start by using the principle of let them lead. I would go and explore that toy with them, or that favorite object with them, in a hand next to hand, or possibly a hand under hand way, so that they get the familiarity of hands they start to build learning that hands aren't always for controlling you and doing things to you. Hands are a way of sharing an experience and being together as well. So I might actually start to, bit by bit, introduce the hand under hand way with that particular toy, and over time offer new things, or start offering to feel around them, and just broadening that experience of something else in the hand, or feeling something else with the hand together. Okay. Next question. Is it appropriate to reposition the hand over hand position, or is it best if the person leading this chooses this position? Okay. So I think you're asking, is it okay to put the deafblind person's hand under yours and then over yours? Is it okay to put the deafblind person's hand over yours and then start the interaction? I would say, if you can avoid that, do. So always try and set up the position by offering your hands underneath. If there's a physical disability that makes that very hard to do, then I would talk to the physiotherapist and maybe the occupational therapist about how you can change that person's positioning, just for them to start learning this way of being with someone. And, is there a way that their arms can be a little bit freer, or, more in sync with your own, or can you position yourself to be more in sync with them? And sometimes that might mean that you actually get out of postural seating position sometimes for a little bit of this, or there might be a way to incorporate that while they're still supported in their postural seating. If I haven't interpreted your question correctly, please feel free to rewrite that or expand on that question. But I will always be saying, invite by offering your hands under. If the deafblind person then repositions their hands under yours or changes that position, if they are leading that change, then I would respect that change. If somehow the change that they're asking for is, you feel like you're not getting the message across that you wanted to, it's like, I really want you to find this bit on the object, or the button, or the, if you push this bit, this object will spring to life, and I really want you to find this bit that makes that happen. If that person is not following you there, respect their need to explore that object in a different way, in not a hearing sighted way, but in a deafblind way, and follow them into the way that they want to explore it. And eventually you may then be able to lead them back to that bit you'd like them to learn about. But just because the agenda has changed, because they have set the agenda, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a great thing. So if this starts out not as you planned, that doesn't matter. It means that the person with deaf blindness is taking initiative and having independent thoughts and exploring things in a way that's meaningful to them. And I would encourage you to join them in that. Here is a comment. And it says, thanks for using a photo of me hand under hand with knees touching. They were in the photo, and thanks for using me. Well, thanks for being a great example. In thinking about the cooking video, so when we're chopping and peeling the sweet potato, how do you position yourself and the deafblind individual if you're using two hands? To me, it feels like a huge lack of personal space could be an issue. So I think this concept of personal space in deafblindness, particularly when somebody has very limited access to vision and hearing, so can't really piece the world together through those senses, or not much of it, or gets a very fragmented view. They're trying to piece the world together through what vision and hearing they do have. And that touch may be their foremost sense of learning. Then the sense of personal space is different. So often they might, if they've had a positive experience of touch and interacting through touch, then they might actually seek that closeness because they know that they need it to understand. So if you're new to this interaction in deafblindness, that closeness can feel a little bit strange at first, because in a hearing sighted world, it's not considered to be appropriate, socially appropriate to be that close to someone. But in a deafblind culture where touch is foremost, then the closeness of touch is considered to be entirely appropriate socially and needed. And there might be a little bit of work to make touch a positive experience for someone with deafblindness if they've had a history of touch that is not interesting or touch that is controlling. So the other option there would be is to potentially come around behind them and use two hands around the back of them. Sometimes if you've got a bench or a table that you could be close enough in to do that sort of in an opposite way, so they can feel from in front potentially. Sometimes you might do one hand and then the other hand. So this is what one hand does, and then come around the other side, and this is what the second hand does, and then maybe join them together. So I don't think you should ever be in a rush, and you should never work on a time scale that is a hearing and sighted time scale. And if it takes 6 months to learn a peeling action, it takes 6 months to learn a peeling action. And the fact that you are together and engaged and sharing something is actually far more important than the final outcome or the goal, that the hearing sighted goal that you might have set. Is it okay to go from under the elbow to a hand under hand position for a child who is physically limited? I think yes. So potentially, if the physical support is required, that I can't actually maintain, me as a deafblind person with limited mobility, I can't actually maintain that hand under hand physically. I just can't do it. Then yes, you might need a little bit more support, and that support might have to come from further up the arm. But I would always be encouraging you to try the hand under hand, and if the hand falls off, that's okay. What we do is we re-invite back into that, because sometimes that fall off might be on purpose, or sometimes it might be, oh, I just lost control. And sometimes we might not ever be really sure which one it is. So I think that that's absolutely fine, is to do, rather than hand under hand, is actually forearm under forearm. That happens. And I think that video from the Deafblind International Communication Network on variations to hand under hand might also help you out and give you a few ideas there as well. Okay, so what types of exploratory experiences would you recommend for absolute initial facilitatory sessions? Cause and effect, musical toys, 3D toys, different sensory boards, or just straight to everyday objects that add meaning to the day? I would say the latter. Because you can spend hours learning about toys, but how does that help you? Except maybe for learning a finger movement or a hand movement, how does that actually help you operate in the real world? And I think there are so many interesting objects in the real world that we do everyday things with. You can do all those things on these real world objects, and you've built familiarity, you've built trust of that object, and then you can learn how to do what you do with it in everyday life, rather than trying to recreate all those experiences with these toys that have no other purpose except to rattle or bang or flip or shake, but then they don't really do anything else other than that. But a whole world of real objects are interesting in terms of their size and shapes and textures and the sounds that they make and how they vibrate and how they feel and what body parts you can fit into them or onto them or around them. Plus that they have a real life purpose that is likely to be relevant to the person with deaf blindness. So I'm all for go straight to the everyday objects, but and not everybody holds that opinion. Okay, so there's a little bit of an add-on to that question about where you have really limited movement. You know, should this be happening with real objects, or should it be ones that are just kind of interesting? Or maybe you could kind of play around with both. But I think don't ever underestimate the power of meaning and meaningful stuff. So the power of somebody to move and engage in something movement-wise, even if it's just little bits of movement, if they understand that that has a real world and real life effect on them. So maybe it would be, you know, learning to, you could put a chain on a bath plug and learn to pull the chain and feel the water disappear. Or you could flip a tap and feel the water come out of the tap. So these maybe simple movements that you could help facilitate that have a real world effect. And now my bath is filling up, and now the water's going out of my bath. Or that's where my toothbrush comes from. It doesn't come from you and your hand and float out of the air, and you know, it doesn't go back into the air and float around me, and then one day it just kind of floats back into my hand again. It actually is stored over there near this hard bench. And every time we come back to that, and every time I know that is where my toothbrush is. So it builds real world knowledge. And I think a lot of people with deaf blindness are always excluded from that real world knowledge because people just present things to them. They don't give them the context of where they've come from or where they're kept, and they don't make them part of that process. But I think if they did more, there would be a little bit more motivation to move and explore and want to find more about the world around them. A follow-up question to cooking. Would you then position yourself behind the individual or opposite them? I think you could possibly do both. It depends on the action. So stirring would be quite easy to facilitate face-to-face and still get a sense of hold the bowl, stir. But something like chopping or peeling is a little bit harder to facilitate, but you still can. So very much depends on the activity, the space you've got to work in, your different sizes. So trying to facilitate that kind of movement with someone that is way, way bigger than you, or way, way smaller or with tiny hands, tiny child hands is different. So there's no fixed answer. But I still think hand under hand is possible if you get a little bit creative about it. And maybe they're only earning, maybe they're just learning some of the action, like, the down, down, down of chopping, or the scrape, scrape, scrape of peeling. And they're learning the hand action. This is how I grip a peeler versus this is how I grip maybe a knife that I need. Maybe I need my finger out on the knife. So it's a different hand position. So maybe they're just learning some aspects of the task in a hand-under-hand way. And the trust is built so that should you ever need to be a little more controlling, they are trusting of the control that you've taken, but know that you will give them the control back as soon as it's safe to do so, or that their independence indicates they're quite able to do that safely by themselves. Right, so another question here. How would you, so it's referring to a previous question, how would you go about building trust around touch with someone who has had negative experiences in the past, either with control or just, whether that's learned helplessness as that in, whether that there's that degree of passivity, passiveness, or whether there's just been some unpleasant and untrusting situations where they just don't trust people to take their hands. So I think I would go back to letting the person lead you. So it might just be the fact that they're not used to somebody just spending time with them in where they're in the lead and they're in the control. So they might be used to people kind of spending time with them, but it's to get them out of bed or get them in the car or get them in the bath or sit them down at dinner table. It's always doing something kind of to them, or it's time for you to do something. And that builds up their understanding of, this is how people are in the world. People's purpose is to get me to do something or do something to me. And they don't understand that people can just kind of be with each other and share an activity and have equal responsibility and turns in that activity. Right? They're just used to the world happening to them and not being part of that action. So you need to undo that learning, and that might just start by being with them or nearby them and just spending that time, and somehow making them aware that you're there, whether that's through touch on the foot or the leg, or maybe shoulder to shoulder, or forearm to forearm, or upper arm to upper arm, or thigh to thigh, or knee to knee, that you are there, but you have no expectation of them. You're just there to share their company and to be with them. And then I would look at how can I join in with what it is you're doing. So if you're just sitting and humming or rocking or tapping your leg or tapping your fingers or playing with your hands, can I join you in that in some way, in a tactile way, so that I've joined you in there, just to be part of that activity. So it's not an easy, this is something that I cannot answer easily or quickly. There is a program that has been developed, I think, for people who have been, who are at risk for this sort of learning about the world, or who are already in that space, and it's called the Hanging Out Program, HOP, HOP for short. And if you Google that program, that starts with 10 minutes of interaction or 10 minutes of just being together and facilitating a place to shared activity and interactiveness, I guess. So that's one way to start, and then always being mindful of how are they getting the information. Is it through their eyes? Is it through their ears? Is it through their sense of touch? Is it Is there a sense of smell involved here? Do they need to mouth things? Is it their sense of taste and texture through their mouth that is important or useful to them? So always being aware of the way that they're accessing the world and feeding the information or the experience through that sense or those senses. And Renee has provided a link to the Hanging Out program there. So that should lead you to a downloadable booklet. Can I just get Renee to confirm that? I'm just not aware of the passions bit in the URL, but that's something that's a bit new to me. Yes, great. It does. It leads you to the booklet that you can download and have a try. Okay, so I think that probably our questions have stopped rolling in. So we'll probably start to wind up. I would like to thank our interpreters, Naomi and Brooke, for their interpretations today of our webinar, and Lee for her live captioning. Yes, and thank you, audience, for your attention today and all your great and insightful questions. I wish you well with trying this technique, and I encourage you to go out and start trying it really soon. But don't give up. Realize that it's a learned skill, and it's a bit by bit kind of process, but it can lead you to some really rich and wonderful learning experience, shared experiences and learning experiences.